Hi everyone, it's Rabbi Dr. Jack Cohen. I hope everyone is doing well out there. Baruch Hashem, it's been very busy over here. Thank God, even though we've had this extraordinary time in our lives with the corona epidemic, many people are dating very successfully and learning how to date effectively and going out there and doing their best and learning how to video date properly. Baruch Hashem, I'm very busy with people throughout the world who are calling me for assistance of all types, whether it's to learn how to put together a great dating resume or top 10 list, or get better at asking questions in the communication part of dating, which is so critical. So if you need my help, feel free to reach out to me from anywhere in the world at 305-206-1916, whether it's to discuss a shidduch that you're in, or would like to get into one and get matched up, or you have an issue with shalom bayis. It's one-stop shop. I love doing it and I love helping everyone. So feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a WhatsApp also, or you can contact me at my website, drjackdating.com, where there are extraordinary and fantastic videos up there for you to watch. The key is to learn and get educated. With proper education, you become such more of an effective dater and partner in marriage. And last but not least, I always like to tell everyone, please go on to partnersinshidduchim.com, put your shidduch resume up, or put the shidduch resume of a friend or a relative or someone that you know that could use some more exposure. It's a fantastic platform. I love it. I use it all the time to look for shidduchim for my clients. So I want to urge everyone out there, please go on Partners in Shidduchim, put up your resume. It's a great platform. It's one of the easiest ones to work with, and it allows you to customize a search of any age, any type, religious background. It's just an extraordinary tool, and I can't compliment it enough. Unfortunately, in my line of work, I deal with a lot of divorced people, many of them coming to me to wanting to get married, and I've seen an uptick recently in a lot of this stuff. So I wanted to discuss, what is it like from the vantage point of a parent when they have to deal with a potential, God forbid, of a child, a son or a daughter that's contemplating divorce? What are the do's? What are the don'ts? Is there a pamphlet out there to tell us what to do? What's the manual? So I collected some fantastic articles that have recently been published, and I wanted to share that with my audience, because to be educated is to be forearmed, is to be forewarned, is to be forearmed. And it's always good to get a good dose of prevention. Okay, when a child's marriage dissolves, parents instinctively want to step in to help, but there are countless hurdles and no instruction manuals on what to do. How can they show support without overstepping boundaries? Obviously, it's a private matter for your child and their spouse. Which situations require intervention and which require withdrawal? How can parents be a bulwark of strength or chizuk for their child when they themselves are reeling from the pain? It's no easy place to be as a parent when you have to contemplate the idea that your child is going to now have a fractured home. It's devastating, it's embarrassing. It can create quite a bit of disillusionment. So let's start with the story. Looking back, there were hints that something was amiss. Shifra regularly called her newlywed daughter Chava, who was living across the Atlantic in Israel, and early on Chava shared some worrying observations about her new husband. But Shifra didn't dwell on it. After all, it was Shana Rishona, first year, and the young couple was starting out on unfamiliar terrain, so she just poo-pooed it off as nothing to worry about. As time passed, Shifra figured that no news was good news, and that with God's help, the young couple was doing well. Still, she was a little disconcerted by the strange silence whenever they spoke, or when she spoke to Chava's siblings about their visits to their sister's home in Israel. I found out later, she says, that they knew what was going on with my daughter, but Chava made them promise they wouldn't tell me anything, says Shifra. Chava's second child was due right after Pesach, so the plan was that she'd return home for Pesach, stay through the birth and initial recovery, have the baby in America, and then return to Israel. But after the baby was born, and Chava was safely ensconced in her parents' home, she decided she wasn't flying back. She wasn't going back to her husband in Israel. What a shock. By then, we'd seen the marriage up close and finally understood how troubled their relationship was, says Shifra. Even though Chava didn't want to return to Israel, she wasn't ready to end the marriage yet, which left Shifra walking a fine line. On the one hand, you want to be supportive, she recalls, for your children. But on the other hand, if it'll blow over, you don't want to say something that will linger. Chava ultimately divorced, thrusting Shifra and her husband into roles they never imagined. According to the Holmes and Rail stress scale, divorce is one of the most stressful life events. While the divorcing couple feels the brunt of the stress, other family members, especially the parents of the child, are also subject to intense emotional shockwaves. It just doesn't end at the doorstep of the husband and wife, but the parents, both sides, have to deal with this. And there's tremendous consequences. There's nothing more painful for a mother than a child suffering, says Bracha, whose daughter left an abusive marriage. I had nightmares for months about my daughter's divorce, reliving in my mind what she had described of her experience. Feelings of guilt are common, as well as second guessing, especially in circles where people marry younger and parents have more input into shidduchim. Some parents have a ton of guilt, says Suri, a licensed social worker who counsels women in difficult marriages. They think we did this. We pushed her into this shidduch. She told me she didn't like him. Why did I just let her go and barrel ahead into the marriage? She told me he's too quiet. And look, he ended up having Asperger's. Why didn't we listen to our daughter? So it's easy and quite frequent that the parents have guilt if there's a divorce. Embarrassment is another excruciating emotion to contend with. Divorce is humiliating for a parent. Parents can blush crimson just imagining the reaction from the outside world. What will people think when they hear our child is divorcing? What will they say? If the couple married recently, the shock might take the parent off guard. I thought everything was going great. I can't believe I spent so much money on the wedding and they're getting divorced. It can take a parent complete shock. Sometimes parents struggle to understand why the adult child wants a divorce. They can't understand the reasoning. Parents had a hard time watching their children live out the negative consequences of their decisions. But if we want to help them, we have to move past it. Although it's a Herculean task to find strength and maintain perspective in the aftermath of a shattered marriage, parents are in a position where they can't afford not to. You have to rise to the occasion because your child needs you to be there for them. You can't break on them. When parents get too wrapped up in their own emotions, it strains the parent-child relationship at a time when the grown child needs it most. If a child is struggling, moving into the pit with them won't help. You've got to stay outside so you can give them chizuk and support. Like someone at an airport who assists an elderly woman by removing her luggage from the baggage carousel, you'd help her lift the bag, but you never dream of taking it home with you. So too is with emotional baggage. You can listen to your child and hold their problem for a moment. You can even cry with them. But after, you must hand their baggage back to them. You can't take it home with you. If you own their problem, it'll weigh you down. And what your child really needs is for you to be emotionally available for them. So you need to become a rock yourself of emotional stability. Though a parent should not carry her child's baggage, she does need to deal with her own. If she's feeling guilt, for instance, she has to work her way through it. Guilt paralyzes parents and prevents them from providing the divorced child with the emotional support they so badly need. So you as the parent have to also make sure that you're centered. The goal is to learn from the past and deal with the information you have now. That's the best way to move forward. Seeking emotional support through therapy, support groups, or close friendships can help a parent gain strength and perspective as she shifts from coping to healing. That's part of what helped Shifra. Processing the feelings that came along with the divorce was not easy, she says. Everyone who gets divorced needs therapy. My husband and I talked through our feelings, we davened, we went for therapy. Our Rosh Yeshiva gave us practical guidance and chizuk. When I told him that I felt like we should have realized there was a problem before the wedding, he told us, "Don't be ridiculous." He helped me release my unwarranted guilt. Bracha credits the positivity she inherited from her father in helping her. He had great emunah, my dad, even though he didn't have an easy life. He taught me to be present-minded. I remember thinking, let's just move forward. Let's not rehash the past. And it's critical to continue to move forward. When a child's marriage is on the rocks, how should the parents proceed? Should they step in to help or should they step back? When and how much should they get involved? It's generally accepted wisdom that parents should not meddle in their children's married lives, lest it create discord between the young couple. Early intervention is a good idea if there's a real problem. The earlier the better. Every situation is different, but there are some difficult marriages that can be saved. Even when it's not great, if it's not a crazy situation, try to make it work. It's still more stable family structure than a divorce. A divorce rarely happens suddenly, and when a marriage is floundering, parents often notice first. If you see your child struggling, try to help them. See if you can help with finances, offer babysitting, send over supper. Bracha agrees. It's a mother's place to be a mother, she says. Just because a child is out of the house doesn't stop you from being a parent. You still have that responsibility of helping your married children. Many young couples are cautioned not to seek their parents' counsel regarding any sort of marital conflict. They're warned it can have the unintentional consequence of souring the relationship between parents and the spouse of their child. However, there are those who disregard that advice and take their parents into confidence if they deem their problem to be too big to bear alone. Girls' parents are often quicker to get involved, maybe because a girl is quicker to share with her parents what's going on in her marriage. Boys tell their Rabbi or a brother. Or maybe we're more protective of our girls and parents are quicker to intervene for a daughter than a son. She raises another point. Because culturally we marry younger, many young couples don't realize when their experience is not normal. Kids are drilled, don't tell your parents, talk to your college teacher. But here's the problem. Many college teachers aren't trained or equipped to deal with issues in a struggling marriage. A couple in crisis needs to go to a Rav, a mentor, a therapist, and they need their parents to help them. On the flip side, there are situations where overly involved parents may be the impetus to their children's divorce. Parents sometimes have been known to schlep their child right out of a marriage. They encourage their children to divorce and say things like, "Come home, you don't need this." I've heard this often. Parents, many pulling their children out of marriages. You may not like your child's spouse, but that's no reason for them to divorce. Suri makes a similar observation. Parents have the instinct to save their children. It can be hard for a parent to understand, and they'll ask their child, "Why are you staying in this marriage? Why can't you just leave?" While there are parents who plant seeds of discord based on personal dislike of their child's spouse, it isn't always coming from a bad place. Parents want to protect their children. They want them to have a happy life. But the instinct to save doesn't always give the parents the presence of mind to admit that all relationships are nuanced, even their children's, and where they see overwhelming imperfection, there may be simply normal marital issues that could be addressed with the help of a skilled marriage counselor. Riva got divorced 10 years ago, but she still clearly remembers the wise way her parents responded to her predicament. They said to me, she says, "You have to decide whether or not you want to stay married, Riva, but we'll support you either way." Great way to deal with it. Riva's father was also upfront about his own bias. He said, "It cannot be objective when he sees me in pain, and he wants the marriage to be over, but he understands that I may decide to remain in the marriage for the sake of the children." Not only should parents leave the decision of divorcing to their child, but if the divorcing couple has children, it's best to remain uninvolved in the entire process, including conversations with lawyers, settlements, custody, and other arrangements. In a relatively normal situation, the less involved, the better. Be emotionally and financially supportive, that's good. Validate your child, but don't get involved in the process. It can get sticky and ugly. A parent may need to get involved if the adult child is relatively young or in a situation where there's a physical and emotional abuse situation or an addict. People involved in an abusive situation may think maybe there's something wrong with me and I deserve this. Parents can't take a passive role then, they must take a more of a stronger proactive stand. Bracha only discovered that her daughter Abigail was in an abusive marriage when concerned neighbors reached out to her. "We brought Abigail back to our home to ensure her safety and had her live with us while she was getting therapy from a psychologist who specialized in abusive relationships. We proceeded cautiously the whole time, getting advice from experienced Rabbanim as well as professionals in the field of domestic abuse. She also financially assisted her daughter. We did what we had to. I didn't want any impediments getting in the way of what my child needed. Yet even with all her involvement, Bracha never dictated to her daughter. I was very clear on what I thought was best, but it was her life and she had to live it. However, if Abigail had decided to work on the marriage, we would have made sure the couple received therapy before moving back into their home and would have monitored the situation closely. It took some time, but ultimately Abigail decided to divorce. By the time a couple reaches the technical stage of divorce, their emotional support has often shut down. Their friends have had enough of it, and many times their family have had enough of it. They're embarrassed, and often their self-confidence has taken a hit. This is when they need their parents the most, and there are myriad ways to show support to the divorcing children. Be a wall. A wall is solid, a wall is strong, a wall is supportive, and a wall is consistent. That's what we need to be. A wall doesn't lean in, it doesn't give advice, it doesn't ask a lot of questions, it does not get hysterical, it does not control. The best way for parents to be supportive is to ask, "How can I best support you, my dear child?" For some, it will mean accompanying their child to a lawyer, or a towing, or picking up the get. For some, it means having a child move back home to a space where they can feel independent. Maybe it means being a listening ear without getting sucked in. Suri admits that parents have a big job. They need to provide physical, emotional, technical, and financial support. The people I see would be up a creek if not for their parents' support. If the divorcing couple has children, the support of a grandparent can be instrumental. Grandparents can supervise during visitations, pick up groceries or make meals, take over carpool when needed, and be there for the grandchild after school. When there's grandparent support, the grandkids are much better off. For Shifra, being supportive meant opening her home to Chava and the grandchildren. The ones who have good support are the ones who make it. So we opened our door, says Shifra. Our home is a buffer, a safe place for all. For parents, there's no other choice. You need to be there to listen to your child, to help out with what you can, to give your child a place to be. Bracha's daughter also moved back home temporarily. Moving back home is not the solution to a divorcee's problems. It's a transitional time between a hard place and an emptiness, which will hopefully be filled one day soon. She recalls a time shortly after Abigail moved back home, when she heard sobbing from behind her daughter's closed door. Avigail doesn't share emotion, says Bracha. She didn't mean for us to hear. I knew she was crushed that her marriage had failed and was mourning the death of her great dream. I knocked and asked if it was okay for me to come in. My husband and I held her with no words, just holding her for a long time. It gave her the chance to cry out the pain. But with support and caring all around her, she didn't need to explain, just to feel understood and cared for. There's a huge difference between divorce with children and divorce with no children. With children, there's an attachment to the ex-spouse for life, unless one parent absconds. For the sake of the grandchild, it behooves parents to encourage a respectful relationship with the ex. A famous study conducted, which studied the long-term effects of parental divorce. If there's a peaceful divorce, or even amicable divorce, the kids have a good chance of turning out okay. Because after all, they're the korbanos, they're the sacrifices from a broken, fractured marriage. Parents should keep their relationship with their ex-mechutanim as peaceful and as civil as possible. You'll share these grandchildren forever. Yes, they may hate you, but put up a front and be decent, be civil. This is a rule Shifra lives by. You can't let your emotions get the best of you. Don't make disparaging comments to the kids about the other side. We had friends who divorced and saw what they went through. We didn't want our grandchildren to have to endure that same horrible, ugly event. Kids need two parents. Since the divorce, there has been shared family simchas. It wasn't great in the beginning, Shifra admits, but as time went on, things improved, perhaps underscoring the importance of maintaining a good relationship, even if it seems one-sided. And if I could just point out something very important, if I interject an important comment, I have many people that I help who are divorced, and I try to get them and seg them right back into getting married and help them with getting matched up, etc. It's important not to speak lashon hara about your ex, or if someone is calling up the other side about your daughter or about your ex, and they'd like to know more information about them, considering them for a second marriage. It's not appropriate, nor is it nice to say lashon hara about the ex. When the family came together again recently for her grandson's bar mitzvah, her ex-mechutanim came to shul and they stayed in a neighbor's home for Shabbos. Chava's ex-husband also spoke at the Sudas mitzvah. At the Achnasas Tefillin, my former mechutenestet thanked me for giving my grandson a warm home. Some families have to deal with the ex-families who make disparaging remarks about them, even going so far as to slander and mutzling. It's really hard when other people say negative things about you. I ask people, who would you rather be? You or the person talking about you? They always choose themselves, and that gives them confidence. Besides, a person will never lose out from doing the right thing. It also helps to remember that although people talk, they don't really know. They don't know what happened. There's a saying, what other people think of me is none of my business. We have no control over what other people think of us, and it doesn't create reality. This mindset is what helped Bracha. When the other side called us liars, and even hired a lawyer who acted as if we had fabricated the story, I told myself, if I had to choose, I'd rather be the parent of the abused than the parent of the abuser. Of course, they're in denial. It's very hard for them to face. Rivka's son Tzvi was in a marriage that was problematic from the start. It was additionally complicated when he learned he had bipolar disorder. After the couple divorced, her ex-daughter-in-law's family blamed her, both for his disorder as well as for the other problems in their marriage. I know we were upfront with them from the start. If they close their eyes to the problems, I cannot take responsibility for that. But I can relate to their distress with compassion rather than relate to their unfair criticism with a sharp retort, says Rivka. What helped me out was sitting down and writing out a lengthy response, getting it off my chest and onto the computer where it remained for a while, giving me satisfaction while doing no damage. When a grown child moves back into their childhood home, it's an adjustment for everyone. The only way to successfully navigate the hurdles is through communication, communication, and communication. Sit down and discuss what's expected before a divorced child moves back in. Discuss privacy. Set boundaries. If a child is working, will they contribute to household expenses? If there are grandchildren involved, discuss their financial arrangements. Hopefully the ex-spouse will contribute. Sometimes it doesn't pay for a divorced mom to work because childcare costs are more than her salary. Talk things through in a loving, respectful tone. Remember, you have an adult, not a child, moving back in. Suri remembers a case where a 25-year-old with the kids moved back home and the divorcee's younger married siblings were treated with more respect than she was, and that's crushing. It was really a terrible situation, Suri says. Don't turn your adult child back into a 5-year-old. Don't tell them what they can or cannot wear. After all, these are people already married. Give them their independence. When Shifra's daughter divorced, she moved back in with her parents for practical reasons. She was working nights and needed help with her children. They ended up dividing household responsibilities. Since her daughter Chava is a wonderful cook, she took over most of the kitchen duties. Initially, Chava was hesitant to move back in because she wanted the final authority over her children. And she wasn't sure how this would play out if she lived with us, Shifra remembers. So we talked about it. We're big on talking everything out. Over time, they worked out a discipline plan. We would ask Chava, can you please tell the children to clean up? Can you please tell the children to make their beds? And the final word came from her. She had to remain the parent to her children. When Tzvi and his kids moved back home, discipline was discussed in advance. We agreed it was his responsibility, Rivka, his mom says, but we did exercise Bobby and Zadie power when it came to what's proper in our home. So if they broke a house rule, we said something. In some ways, Avigail's return home was seamless. It was as if she had never been gone, says Bracha. Pitching in was never an issue. That's just the type of person Avigail is. But there were other challenges. The relationship between Avigail and her sister Chedva, who was just 1 year younger, has always been strained, and Avigail's divorce created additional tension. It was rough between them, Bracha recalls. When Avigail moved back, we tried to make it easier for Chedva. They used to share a room when Avigail lived at home, but we gave Avigail a different room when she returned. Avigail had a business that she runs from home, and clients would come and go. But Chedva didn't want that in the house, so Avigail rented space elsewhere. When the dust settles after a divorce, it's tempting to look backward. But it isn't helpful, Shifra says. Don't second guess yourself. You can tell yourself a million times, I should have realized, I should have said something during their engagement. Sometimes you have to realize there is no resolution. This is what Hashem gave us, and we have to deal with it from here. Bracha agrees. There is no point in going backward. The past is gone. It can't be replayed. Be there for the pain and confusion your child is going through now, and move forward. At this point, I saw an incredible article last week written by one of the top shadchanim in Lakewood, Tzadok Katz, who writes something amazing. He looks with a prism at all of the experiences he's had in Shidduchim, and he comes up to some interesting conclusions about some phenomenon that are taking place today. And I'd like to share his comments because I think they're very apropos to tonight's conversation. And he writes, recently I've been approached by quite a few people who are suffering from what we call divorce remorse. Again, I call it divorce remorse, which has compelled us to write this article. It's not that the previous generation was heartless and uncaring. On the contrary, they cared a great deal. It's just that they weren't living in 2020 where we live today. To be honest, I've always been bothered when people would wish Mazel Tov after a divorce. What's there to celebrate? Doesn't the Gemara say that the altar or the Mizbeach sheds tears when a couple gets divorced? In fact, having been involved in Shidduchim full-time for many years, my apprehension has only been confirmed by my repeated encounters with what I call divorce remorse. It often happens that the get is not the couple's release to a bright future, but the squandering of an opportunity to work on building a beautiful marriage, facing the nisayon or the tests or the challenges that Hashem has given them heads on, and becoming heroes through their efforts to deal with the challenges they encounter along the journey. They just decided to take the exit door and leave and eject. Obviously, every case is unique, and we're not saying that no one should ever get divorced, but there has definitely been a massive uptick in the number of people who realize after being on the market for the second time for a year or 2 or 3, that the enormous issues they thought they had while they were married pale in comparison to those they now must face in trying to get remarried. They realize it's not so easy. It's not so simple. I often cite the statistics to many of my clients. Statistics now, the divorce rate for first-time marriage is somewhere around 60%. It shoots up to somewhere between 70 to 75 after second marriages. And it's higher, over 80% for third marriages. Don't think it's a bowl of cherries waiting for you out there, because as many of our sages have said, all you're doing is trading 6 for a dozen. Oftentimes the problems awaiting you after divorce are worse than your problems that you have now while you're divorced. Seeing this new reality, I'd like to share some of my thoughts. In my opinion, one of the biggest problems is that when a couple is contemplating divorce, the issues they are dealing with become magnified, analyzed, and discussed with so many people that it creates a situation that's very hard to creep out of, even when a resolution is possible. Too many cooks stirring the pot. I often caution all of my clients, if there's an issue in the marriage, be careful what you tell your parents. Try not to involve them. It should be between yourselves and a competent da'as Torah, a rabbi, a coach of some kind, a therapist with an excellent reputation. Once you get family or friends involved, it turns into a full-blown war, as people who don't know what they're doing voice their comments and their opinions when they're ill-equipped to do so. When I was growing up, my grandmother would always tell us about her older sister. It seems that after being married for only a short period of time, she went home to her parents to complain about her new husband. Her parents sat her down and said, "You're a married woman now, and we don't want to hear about it. Go back home and work it out with your husband." Great advice. In the good old days, a smart, knowledgeable rabbi would sit down with the couple and try to put out the fire before the whole house burned down. These days, each side has a therapist to talk to and to represent him or her, which often leads to an escalation of a full-blown war. I've had the privilege of speaking about this phenomenon with a great rabbi, who I personally knew as well, Rabbi Melech Bluth, who was instrumental for many years in keeping thousands of couples together. He felt very strong that couples having individual therapists was a huge problem, because the job of a therapist should be to assist the couple in communicating with each other rather than validating each side's complaints. Another problem is the tendency of some therapists to lead newlyweds immediately to the emergency exit without a parachute, which only provides short-term relief and has difficult long-term repercussions. It's easy to get out of a marriage. It's easy to get into a marriage, but how complicated it is to get out. Another factor is that we are undeniably influenced by the larger society in which we live and whose beliefs are contradictory to our Torah values. Here's another observation. The abuse excuse is being abused, meaning that the word is tossed around entirely too casually these days. When children use it, it can mean anything from being beaten to not having received the exact high-end bicycle they wanted for Hanukkah. In the context of marriage, many newlyweds who don't realize that acclimating to their new reality requires some time are quick to allege abuse. They start pointing fingers, abuse. And the word is tossed around so casually, unaware that there's a learning curve in marriage. Just as there's with anything unfamiliar, you have to give it time. When a child comes home from the first day of school with complaints, we don't tell him, okay, your teacher is mean, we're going to transfer you to a new school. We don't tell him that. Instead, we encourage it, give it some time. And everything usually works out. Finding the end, every child has a problem with the Rebbe the first week or two. It takes time to blend in. We don't understand why we get so caught up when it comes to a rocky start in marriage. In our opinion, facilitating a fast and easy divorce after only a few months of marriage is not your child's ticket to freedom, but a membership card to a life full of challenges and pain. And here's some advice for well-meaning but ill-equipped family members. We would do well to remember the words of Rav Vigdor Miller, who said that the job of parents is to keep their wallets open and their mouths shut. I remember the Rav, Zechnot Hagil Rachai, used to always tell us, a father should keep his mouth closed and his wallet open. All too often, parents who take on the role of saving their child from what seems to them to be a disastrous marriage are the ones who are unable to watch their children get shots or take them to the dentist, or who cried all day after putting them on a school bus for the first time. Many siblings are also quick to diagnose their newlywed siblings' marriages with labels like toxic, abusive, or unhealthy, and then swoop in to save them from their terrible situation. This has got to stop. Again, this kind of behavior has to stop. Young couples must be taught that there's no room for their parents, siblings, or any family members in their marriage. And I mean zero. I believe that if there really is an issue, one of the parties will instinctively seek help from a safe source. They don't need to be told that they need help. On another note, I really think that if the thousands of hours and dollars and resources that are usually invested in orchestrating a divorce were allocated to saving the marriage and maximizing any possibility of a positive outcome, the divorce landscape would look much different than it looks today. Why do we put so much energy into ending something when it can be saved for the same price? It's like declaring bankruptcy after a month of poor sales instead of focusing your energy on how to build your business. Just to be clear, we're not saying chas v'shalom that an outside party should never be involved. On the contrary, talking to a competent person with Torah values who can put everything in perspective can be crucial in saving a marriage. Such a person can often calm the couple's fears, give them confidence in their relationship, and steer them out of the mess they find themselves in. But again, this is only when they go together to one person versus going to their separate ways, to individual therapists who cause them just to become disenchanted from each other. Just stand back, remain quiet, daven, and give it time. Give the marriage time to build. You'll be amazed at the results. Thank you so much for giving me your time tonight. I hope that the material that we presented today would be helpful to help all those parents out there. If they smell a problem, what they can do. Tonight we offered that manual of all the various things you can do to help your child navigate a chapter that we hope you should never have to experience in your life. And I wish everyone hatzlacha u'bracha v'chol hatov. Thank you.